The neighborhood of St. George was created around the end of the 19th century. Soon after the neighborhood's creation, the county of Richmond joined with 4 other counties of New York to become the city of Greater New York. Shortly after consolidation, Staten Island Civic Center was moved from Richmond Town to St. George, which was viewed to be a more suitable location. In 1906, Staten Island's Borough Hall was established at 10 Richmond Terrace. In the next decade, the Richmond County Courthouse was constructed down the block at 18 Richmond Terrace. On March 23, 1982, both buildings were designated as New York City landmarks. The origin of St. George's name comes from Staten Island's biggest promoter for his time, Erastus Wyman. Around 1880, Wyman came up with a grand scheme of replacing the 10 ferries which operated from various points on the island with just one. This new ferry terminal would be located at the northernmost tip of Staten Island, making the commute into Manhattan much easier. There was just one small problem. The site on which Wyman planned to erect this ferry terminal was owned by the arrogant engineer George Law, who refused to give up his beautiful waterfront property. Wyman finally persuaded Law into selling his property after assuring him that the surrounding neighborhood would be given Law's name. Thanks to these gentlemen, St. George is now home to Staten Island's biggest public transportation hub. First of all, you have the ferry itself, which runs from Staten Island all the way along the water to Whitehall Street in Manhattan. Next, you have the Staten Island Railway, whose northernmost station is located inside the ferry terminal. The train runs all the way from St. George down to Tottenville. Lastly, you have the buses. At the ferry terminal, there are over a dozen buses which depart from 4 different ramps to get to various destinations on the island. In St. George, no matter what your interest may be, you will certainly find something to do. Most of these facilities have been here since the early 1900s. The Staten Island Museum was founded in 1881 by 14 naturalists who wanted to preserve the past and present for the future. A building was constructed for this purpose at 75 Stuyvesant Place. Inside the museum, you can find exhibits related to the natural science, arts, and history of Staten Island. At 25 Hyatt Street, you can find the St. George Theater, which was built in 1928 and is still used today. Just down the block at 5 Central Avenue, you have the St. George branch of the New York Public Library, which has been in use since 1907. Above the library at the other end of the ferry terminal, you have the Richmond County Bank Ballpark, or more commonly referred to as the Staten Island Yankees Stadium. This ballpark opened in 2001 and as a place for the Staten Island minor league baseball team to play. The ballpark has a beautiful view of the New York Harbor, the Statue of Liberty, and Lower Manhattan. Along with the baseball games, this ballpark houses special events such as concerts and picnics. Right between the ballpark and its parking lot, you will find the Staten Island September 11th Memorial, also known as Postcards Memorial. The memorial was opened in 2004 to honor the 270-plus Staten Island victims of the September 11th attack. It was uniquely designed to look like postcards being sent to lost loved ones. If you stand in between the 2 sides of the memorial, there are 9x11 granite plaques for each Staten Islander lost in the attack. Also, by standing in between the 2 sides, if you look to Lower Manhattan, you're looking at the site of the World Trade Center. Although there are many grand facilities within St. George, it still has plenty of room to house parks. If you continue along the North Shore waterfront, you will get to the North Shore Esplanade. The North Shore Esplanade is a quiet area between Richmond Terrace and Bank Street, as well as between Bank Street and the New York Bay. This space has nice paths to walk or ride bicycles along, benches, drinking fountains, and a nice view of the water. Traveling back toward Borough Hall, you will find Barrett Triangle, a small triangular plot of land that houses the Clarence T. Barrett Memorial. This memorial is a bronze statue with a decorative drinking fountain which was originally placed near the Staten Island Borough Hall in 1915. Clarence Barrett joined the military voluntarily when the Civil War began. He became a major while serving in the war. Upon his return to Staten Island, he continued his work in landscape architecture and sanitation engineering. Towards the end of his life, he served as the superintendent of the poor and the police commissioner. In 1945, the memorial was moved to its current location. The only downside to moving the memorial was that the drinking fountain does not work anymore. Walking back up the block parallel to the ferry terminal, you will find Wall Street, where there is another park at the end of the street. Lieutenant Leah Playground, located on the western end of the street, was opened in 1972 under this name. Lieutenant Nicholas Leah was a Staten Islander who served in the Vietnam War under the Marine Corps. He received a Purple Heart and a Gold Star for his dedication to the United States. This park holds a flagpole with a memorial to Lieutenant Leah, play equipment, decorative paving, game tables, and drinking fountains. In the northern part of the neighborhood is the St. George Historic District, where you will see some of Staten Island's historic homes by taking a stroll down Carroll Place, Hamilton Avenue, Phelps Place, Richmond Terrace, St. Mark's Place, or Westervelt Avenue. On the sections of these streets within the district, you can find 76 architecturally significant houses which were constructed between 1835 and 1987. Among these buildings is the St. Peter's Church, the oldest Roman Catholic church on Staten Island. The congregation for St. Peter's Church began to meet during the 1830s. It wasn't until 1903, however, that the current building for the church was erected. If you're looking for a nice place to live in St. George, the historic district isn't the only place to go. If you've heard of Lieb Pertz, you may be happy to find that 3 of the buildings he developed, the Pearl, the Point, and the View, are located in the St. George area. The Pearl and the Point are located by the Bay Street landing area of St. George, while the View sits across the street from the parking lot of the Richmond County Bank Ballpark. Aside from giving its residents views across the water, each of these waterfront condominiums allow the walk to the St. George Ferry Terminal to be quite short. If you're looking for more of a historic district type home, you can try the Ambassador Apartments, an enormous Art Deco style building which has been standing since the 1890s. Right next to this building is Fort Hill Circle, which has a number of luxury houses sitting atop the hill for which the street was named. St. George is home to 2 outstanding public high schools. On St. Mark's Place, you have the Ralph R. McKee Career and Technical Education High School. Not far away, on Hamilton Avenue, you can find the Grander Curtis High School, which has 6 different programs to help students advance in their career paths. Even though there are only 2 high schools in this area, there are a number of both public and private schools in the surrounding neighborhoods. For more information on the neighborhoods of Staten Island, you can visit our website at realestatesiny.com.